All right, this is about something that I've been working on. It's a part of my philosophical, metaphysical work that I've been doing. So a couple weeks ago, I had this wild dream where I was flashing into the future, and then I was flashing into the past. Like, the way it was flashing, it was like, I'm in the future, bam, I'm in the past, bam, I'm in the double far away in the future, bam, bam, and then I'm back in the past, more further back in the past, bam, 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 and just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth like that. And the dream lasted forever. It was fucking crazy. And when I woke up, I was really thinking. I remembered it, and I was really deeply thinking about it. And then that night, I figured out the a mathematical demonstration of what I witnessed. Okay, so I'm gonna read it here. It is easy to imagine our perception of time and space when we consider the progression as a linear flow. So here's just a straight linear graph, okay, in the first dimension. And scrolling down a little bit here. The linear function above represents the flow of time under the normal consciousness perception. So that means that when we're in our normal consciousness state, or normal state of consciousness, we observe time flowing like this linear function. Okay? So this is the mathematics of the linear functions, y equals mx plus b. So we can see that time simply flows forward, and the slope m in y equals mx plus b gives the space that time has occupied in the set range of limits. So what I'm saying here is, as time flows on, you get this slope, which is m, right? That's this arrow here, m. Okay? And the area underneath of this slope, that's the space that was created. That's the space-time continuum. That's how it works. Time flows, and underneath of the graph of that time, that's where the space is created. Okay? So how do we determine the numerical value of the space created under M? Okay, how do we do that? Well, we got to use differential calculus to integrate a particular space under the slope and then get an actual dimensional space that the time has occupied. So I'm going to scroll down, and here's an example of an integration. This is integrating f of x over a and b, space a and b, and you get s. Okay? So s represents space that sits under the slope of the flow of time. This is how the space-time continuum is related. Space is given by time, or vice versa. At any rate, we can see from the simple graphs that time is correlated to space. Mathematically speaking, space can be represented as by taking the integral of time x within the range of limits. When we integrate a linear function, and this is the waking consciousness here I'm talking about, time, how we observe time. To find the space that's generated within the range, we get this function here. So I did a little mathematical manipulations to integrate for the linear equation. So here's what you get. This is now the first integral of, this is the integral of y equals mx plus b. So you see, you almost get you get an exponential shaped graph. So now this is how time is going to flow. This is how space is going to look in this dimension. Space in the space-time continuum is the integration of this function. In other words, what is this, or in other words, it is the space below the slope. A simple way to think about it is that space expands as time flows on. The rate of spatial expansion relative to time in a linear function is squared. Okay? So that's what we've determined here by this math. The shape is squared. So the space that's created is squared. Okay? So that's how you represent the spaces created by time. You square it. That's what you get when you integrate a linear function. Okay? So this is how the space-time continuum exists in a non-altered form. In other words, when our consciousness enters the rather brain-dead state of being known as the waking state, or the survival state, or the 3D reality, or whatever you want to call it, this is how the time will flow, and it simply moves forward, and consciousness in this state interacts with the environment accordingly, and the environment is the space. As time moves on, space expands to the second power. It's squared. However, in heightened states of consciousness, this is what we get. We get, in the dream state, death state, or astral planing state, the perception of the space-time continuum is totally different. Okay? This change can be represented as a cube root function, which is f of x equals the cube root of x. Okay? So the graphical representation of which can be seen as this. This is the cube root function. Here we can see at the asymptote, time shifts rather drastically from the past to the future, which is exactly what I was experiencing in my dream. This is how my dream was. Like a cube root function. The graphical representation demonstrates how time is perceived in altered states of consciousness. So, we should then ask, well, how can we integrate this? What are we going to do? How can you integrate this, and what's going to happen when you do integrate it? So that's what I did. Okay? So you just integrate this function, you get t, therefore x equals t cubed, and you just work through this doing some calculus, and you end up here. This is the answer, this is the solution. And this is represented graphically like this. So this is the space that's generated in the altered state, and this is the space that's generated in the normal state. So you see there's a big difference. This is squared, and this one is to the fourth. So see? T to the 4 plus C. So this, the space that's generated is to the power of the fourth, and that is really weird. Here we can see a drastic increase in space because the function is not squared to the fourth power. Space expands quite rapidly in the other dimension. When we are in an altered state of consciousness, we perceive time as the cubed root, i.e. time might flow backwards, or it might skip ahead, or it might pulse. It really depends on where in space your perception exists. In mathematical terms, you are the f of x in the equation f of x equals the cube root of x. And x is time. Once again, when we integrate the area under the slope of this function, we get insight into the shape of space that is brought into existence from time. Now, when we take the cube root function as a Riemann surface, this is what we get. Okay? This is the Riemann surface of the cube root. So this is the altered state of consciousness right here. This is the space-time continuum, a representation of the space-time continuum in the altered state of consciousness. Check that out, man. The representation depicted above is about as close as one can come to visualizing our perception of space and time in the altered state of consciousness. The graph above takes into account the holomorphic function that could result when complex numbers are used as data points in our evaluation of space-time matrix. Most likely, the representation can demonstrate how time and space flow in our dream state, or our death state, or deep meditation states. Okay? This is how it works right here. This is what I figured out. If you have any ideas, I'm really wanting people to contribute to this, because this is just the beginning. This is a really wild discovery that I made. So I need some help to develop this idea. I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much.